Mine is second-hand. My stepmom and my dad used to work opposite shifts there for a while. He was on nights, her on days. They had a set of baby monitors from when my sister and I were babies. My dad said they could record short messages with them, and they would leave them out on the coffee table for the other to hear when they got home from their shift. This went on for a bit, then once their shifts lined up they put the monitors away in storage. She died of cancer at a really young age, and my dad had just gotten back from the funeral and was home alone. He spent that night going through their things, packing some of her stuff away. He said he had one of the baby monitors sitting out on the coffee table, and it woke him up in the middle of the night with an old message going off on repeat that she had recorded. It said "I love you Mike, I love you Mike," over and over. My dad told me he just sat on the couch in the dark and listened to her message until the batteries died. A couple of weeks later he had picked us kids up for the weekend. After my sister and I went inside he said he was sitting on the porch smoking and a strong gust of wind blew and he said he could smell her perfume that she always wore. It scared me hearing those stories as a kid, but now I can see the beauty and peace in those experiences. My grandfather was a bad man. Alcoholic, extremely violent, tried to kill my grandmother in front of their kids. One of his less horrible acts was abandoning my grandmother with their 6 kids, all under the age of 12. Some of his kids maintained minimal contact with him. He lived about 30 or 40 miles from my grandmother and the 2 kids who'd stayed in the area. When he was in his 80s he was hospitalized and then passed away in the middle of the night. In the morning his oldest child, one of my aunts, went to the morgue to identify the body and fill out paperwork. On her way she stopped by my grandmother's to break the news. When she came in my grandmother said, "Oh, it's a sad day. He died just past midnight, I imagine." My grandmother had begun to show some signs of dementia or just basic old age, and so the weird comments weren't too out of character. And my aunt assumed that the hospital one of her siblings had already called to tell their mother the news. My aunt shook it off and drove to the morgue. When she saw the death certificate she was shocked to see the time of death listed as 12:10 a.m. On her way home she stopped back at my grandmother's and asked her who had called her to tell her the news and asked why. She said that she thought he died just past midnight. My grandmother said he came to see me at 12:30 and we talked for a spell. He wanted to apologize for all he'd done to me and you kids. I think he made his peace and was able to move on, so I'm glad for that. My grandmother then resumed humming and doing a jigsaw puzzle. Not creepy but kind of cool. My mother split and transplanted a rose bush from my grandfather's farm about 40 years ago. It took but never bloomed. At that point she only kept it because it grew into the fence nicely and kept us kids from climbing it. My grandfather died about 5 years after she transplanted it and that spring it bloomed red roses. A few years after that my grandmother died and the spring after it bloomed white roses. These are the only 2 years it has ever bloomed. Growing up, my older brother had a computer program that he used to compose piano music on. I remember I was reading in the living room when I heard the most beautiful violin melody I have ever heard. I listened to the whole thing, which was several minutes long. I walked down the hallway to compliment my brother on his masterpiece when I realized my brother was not using the computer and I was home alone. Late to the party, but here is mine. I used to be in the military and the training camp bunk that we lived in was said to be haunted. Occasionally, our stuff would go missing and reappear in weird places, like under our bed or inside a bag that we had zipped up and stuff. No big deal, right? I mean, human error and all. Then came the instance that freaked everyone out. It was one night after lights out and my friend was on his phone texting his girlfriend. Most of us were drifting off to sleep and were lying on our beds, etc. Suddenly, he heard the shuffling of feet from the corridor, so thinking that it was our sergeant, he quickly hid his phone under his pillow, rolled over on his side, and pretended to sleep. Till this day, what happens next chills me to the bone. While he pretended to sleep, he heard someone right behind him, at the other side of his bed, going, "Don't worry, you can continue to pretend sleep." I would dismiss this as a figment of his imagination, except about 5 other people around him heard it as well, including me. Creepier still, there was no one there, and it was the voice of a little girl that said it. For reference, our training camp was in the middle of an island and was set up away from the main admin blocks. The island has been closed by the government for army training purposes for the past 15 years, so there were definitely no civilians around, let alone kids. To make matters freakier, When we came back from our weekend home leave, there was a bunch of female hair on his bed, neatly bundled up, long and jet black. Under his pillow was a note, "Remember me?" Now, as I said, we were in the middle of a forest, in the middle of an island. And at that point in time, there were no female recruits personnel on the island. Our bunks were locked up for the weekend, and the duty sergeant had no idea that the incident happened. We never spoke about it after that night. Still chills me to the bone thinking about it. Edit, yes guys, I am from Singapore. And as those of you guys who are from there would know, until recently, army camps in Singapore did not allow handphones with cameras, so no pictures. Also, for those of you that say it may be a prank. Yes, it very well may have been. But if it were, it'd be one heck of a prank, and I was really fooled bad. The complexity of that prank would have been crazy, and I applaud anyone that was able to pull that off. That being said, many Singaporean guys will tell you that the Camp Tekong is a place where a lot of paranormal stuff happens. Most guys that have been through that camp have either experienced something firsthand or know someone that has experienced it firsthand. Lastly, for those of you saying I fabricated the whole thing, my job is not to convince you, I'm simply relating what the heck happened to me and my army buddies. Believe what you will, but I know what happened to me. Middle of the night, sleeping. I hear a sound like someone is taking a paper clip from my desk and throwing it against a wall, and it bounces across the desk. I wake up to this noise, turn on the light right by my bed as I sit up. I look over and see nothing. Weird. As I'm ready to lay back down, my 20-pound steel gumball machine falls from the shelf over my bed directly onto my pillow, where my head was not 30 seconds earlier. I flip out and scramble out of my bed as I'm totally taken by surprise. As I stand up, I feel something under my feet, a paper clip. I put the murderous gumball machine on the floor, the paper clip back on my desk, and crawl into the safety of my comforter. Nothing like that happened again. Edit, the shelf was a bookcase headboard that was only a foot taller than my bed. It probably wouldn't have killed me, just would have damaged my face, I'm guessing. But I was also 10 years old, so, you know, there's that lack of forethought for you. When I was about 16 years old, I encountered something that still bugs me to this day. I woke up around 6 a.m. on a normal weekday and went downstairs to get ready to school. No one else in my family had woken up at this point. I got in the shower, still sleepy and could barely hold my eyes open. After a few minutes of showering, someone tried to get it and I told whoever it was that I was in the shower. The person then proceeded to aggressively open the door. I saw the door handle going up and down like crazy, and he or she whatever knocked on the door harder and harder. And then it suddenly stopped. Didn't think that much about it, but when I got out of the shower I realized that nobody was up yet. I proceeded with eating breakfast. And after a while my dad came down the stairs, so I asked him if it was he who had wanted to use the bathroom earlier. He said no, and that both my mom and younger brother was still asleep, so it could have not been them either. And even if it had been any family member, they would not have tried to open the door so aggressively at 6 in the morning. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister, and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie, would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6 years old, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake my sister up, but she rolled over to go back to sleep. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke my sister up and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, nothing was there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or other demon in our room. We know we aren't crazy because the dog saw it too.